I am delighted now to welcome to the stage the panelists for our first one, which is called The Starting Line, very apt. And we have Shyala Smith, Alom Shaha, Simran Diamond Singh, Dev Kothari, and we are being moderated by Farrah Riaz. So please welcome everyone.
Oh, I feel very tall because I've put heels on today, so that's very nice. So, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to Sailfest 2025, and this is our first panel of the day, the starting line, and it's at the beginning of the day, so that is very apt, as Sanchita said. So, we're going to be talking about what it's like to be a first-time debut and an illustrator. So, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Farrah Riaz, and I am a picture book author. I published last year in 2024 in August. I might get a. Okay. So yes, I'm Farrah Riaz, and I'm your host. But I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. So you have the lovely mics. And if we just sort of start at the end, maybe, and we can
Hi,
introduce ourselves.
my name is Dev Kothari. I am an author. My debut was called Bringing Back KK. I've got a picture book which has just come out literally yesterday. So really happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm Simran Diamond Singh, and I'm an illustrator. This is also my first panel, so I'm very nervous, but thank you.
Hi, I'm Alom Shaha. I'm first and foremost a dad of two young girls, and then I'm a science teacher, and I happen to have written some books as well.
Hi, I'm Shyala, and I'm a picture book author. And when I'm not writing books, I'm a full-time marketer.
So maybe get this mic, and then we could share those three. Okay. Hello. Everyone can hear me. That's fine. Okay. So we are going to go right to the beginning. What would you say was the turning point, the moment that made you realize that this could be possible? And then where were you, or what were you doing when you found out your book was going to be published? So who would like to go first?
Oh, okay, it's me. I think the first real moment that I thought I could be a published author was when I won the Common Word YA Diversity Prize. Up until that point, I'd been writing, and trying to get my stories out, and it just didn't feel like it was going to happen. But I got the prize, didn't get a publishing deal for that book. That book, no one's ever going to see it, by the way, other than the people who read it, who were forced to read it. But that made me believe that I could actually be a published author. And when I found out, I did a MA for writing for young people from Bard Spa, and I was at the graduation in a pub celebrating with my wonderful friends. When I got a text from my agent saying that we've got a deal, we've got an offer rather. But I didn't feel comfortable actually sharing that with anyone because my then agent said, well, it's just an offer. So just, hold off. It took 9 months after that to actually get the contract signed, but that was the deal, yeah. But it was the hugs that I got from my family members after I went back home from Bath. Oh, Mimi, you're going to be an author, you're proper author. I think that was the moment. That was the moment, yeah.
That's lovely. What else?
Should I go next? So for me, I'm an illustrator. So I work with my agent, and then it goes through the publishers. So I remember when my agent first contacted me. So it was interesting because usually as an illustrator, you would put your work out to the agency. But for me, I did a competition, and then that's how my agent found me. And she had a writer because she works with writers and illustrators. And she was like, oh, I think your style would be perfect for this book that this writer's bringing out. And I remember I did that, and it was really exciting, but then I didn't get it. And that kind of obviously your first rejection hits a bit different. But then I still worked on my portfolio, and then another offer came in. And I did the sample illustrations for that. And I remember I was just sitting in my bedroom, drawing, and I got a call from my agent, and she was like, it's not been 100% confirmed yet, but publishers really liked your work, and I think they're going to go with you. And I remember just sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be a published illustrator. It was so strange because also I've been such like an academic kid. Like art was always a second thing for me. It was always just a hobby. And then I went in the living room and I told my mom and dad, and it was really cool.
I went to lots of meetings with my first book and with really big publishers. One publisher, there was a whole room of people and they had croissants and orange juice and stuff. And it was all very exciting. And I met with the publisher who I really wanted to publish my book, a very famous, I'm not going to mention any names here, but very famous children's publisher. And I'd finished my day at school, I was checking my emails, and I got the email from my agent saying, so-and-so wants your book. And I remember turning to my colleague and celebrating and thinking, wow, like this guy, this editor is going to publish my book. And then a few weeks later, my agent wrote and said, really sorry, so-and-so is not going to publish your book. And I won't go into the details, but it was quite distressing. And then I just went on Twitter and I was like, I've got this book. Does anybody want to publish it? And somebody in Australia, a bookshop owner in Australia said, that sounds really interesting. I think I know a publisher. And what ended up happening was an Australian publisher published my book first. There wasn't a British publisher who was interested. And also my agent didn't make the book happen. Social media made the book happen. And that Australian publisher continued to support me, and I've done 4 books with them. And I've been very lucky to have the support of that particular publisher. So, my experience has been mixed. And I'll stop there for now.
So I had a similar experience as well. So I was in Sri Lanka when that happened. That's where I'm from. And has anyone heard of DV Pit? Okay, so basically I was found through DV Pit. I pitched, and the funny thing was the editor who liked my pitch, she was working for an adult publisher at the time. So I assumed that she mistakenly liked my pitch and I wasn't going to send it in. So what happened with I was telling my husband this like a few days later, and he was like, just send it in. What would happen? Like she would say, oh, I made a mistake. I think 8 months, 6 months, 8 months later, she's here in the room anyways. She sent me an email from Tate Publishing, and I thought that was a scam. So I was like, yeah, this doesn't sound right. Anyway, obviously, Sherry's my editor bought the book. Yeah.
No, I think what's so interesting is how it's been a mixture of like people have agents and like without agents. So for me, I think I felt it was possible when I got an agent because I naively didn't realize that, your first book doesn't always get published. So it's so interesting to hear, like sometimes deals fall through. So I think for me, it was getting an agent thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to happen, naively thinking it's all going to happen really fast. The offer probably came in 6 months, but it took 12 months for the contract to get signed afterwards. And I kept thinking, they're going to change their mind. Like, this isn't going to happen. And so it's just sort of thinking that when the offers come in, how do you sort of process that? And I told my writer friends first because I thought those were the people who were going to be most excited, actually, to be fair. I was home alone when I got the email from the agent. So it's just really interesting to hear how sometimes we think an agent is going to sort of be the person who's going to make everything happen. And then sometimes you get sort of, social media stepping in. So thank you. Yeah, no, that's been fascinating. I think what is something unexpected you've learned about yourself since becoming published? So you've all become published now. So what's something unexpected, would you say, that you've learned in this journey? Anyone who wants to go first, or we can go in order, I don't mind.
Okay. I would say that I have found that I have vast amounts of patience and the capacity for rejection.
Thick skin, that's what you need.
How much I enjoy burning bridges. Just, I think on a serious note, in terms of my writing, I have a massive problem with my writing in that I don't write for myself. I'm not one of these people who has a burning desire to write. I really want to write. I want to speak to other people. I want to talk about things that I'm interested in, that I think are important, but I can't do it without some sort of external pressure. And that means an agent or a publisher or a deal or something. And I've tried to change that, and I can't. And one of the things I've learned that is really interesting, we all, especially this is for all you out here there who are trying to be writers, you'll hear lots of people at forums like this talking about what it means to be a writer, how one writes and so forth. And it's really important to remember that there are lots of different ways to be a writer. And if you, like me, whenever I hear other writers, I'm just like, I'm not like that. That's not how I think. That's not how I work. And I've come to accept that that's okay. It's really okay that I am not like other writers. I haven't encountered someone standing on a stage telling me about their experience and feeling that it resonated with me. So I'm saying this now in case what I say resonates with anyone out there, because we can all write, but we don't all write in the same way.
Oh, it's okay. I think for me, still don't feel like a published illustrator. I feel like every new like book that comes out, or like even us being asked to do this event, I was saying to other people, I was like, I don't feel qualified. The imposter syndrome really hits, which is so interesting because I thought that being published would mean that that feeling would go away. But I think I've learned to use that feeling to like strive forward and be like, you're always going to be nervous and there's always going to be that feeling like you don't belong, but sometimes you just have to do stuff scared. So yeah.
Absolutely. A couple of things for me. I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy spending time with kids. It is just insane the energy that you get when you go to a school event or a workshop or something. And I just, all of my previous jobs, I was a management consultant and I worked in tech for a very long time. They were very sort of, serious. And linked to that as well, the unexpected thing was that all of the things that made me not fit in before in my previous jobs, the quirky side of me, all of my interests, and all of the crazy, the fact that I love wearing accessories or, K-dramas and, K-pop music or whatever, other kind of all sorts of interests. They were really big assets here as an author. I can be myself. And any place that I go to, kids will always, as long as I can talk sports and I can talk, about any Korean stuff, I can talk to any kid out there. And as long as I can talk to teachers about how hard it is about, being around kids and doing this difficult job. So I think that was, the unexpected gift of just being able to be yourself. I didn't realize that was possible, before.
And I think, and I sort of say the same. So I think one of the things for me, my actual full-time job is like higher education data management. So like writing for children is completely different. And I think I didn't realize that I could talk in public, and I still sort of get really nervous. Like I would be really nervous doing this, but I sort of have learned to let performance Farrah out and let her like just get on with it. And also traveling to different places that, even in England, like, there's sort of bookshops and schools and nurseries and like events that I would never have even gone to. Visiting all these places, like that's been amazing. All the different librarians, teachers, all the children, that's been incredible. And that's been like, I know we think we know being a children's writer, like, yes, of course we're going to be dealing with children, but like you don't know until you've actually done that first event or first 10 events. And I think that's been really incredible for me. So that's an unexpected bonus, I think. And what I've learned about myself is that actually maybe I'm a little bit braver than I think. And so it's fine. And it's okay, as we say, let fear take over. But and how you're sort of so accomplished and you still think that like we're back to the beginning each time that you're sort of doing something and you think, is this a fluke? Am I just here because they just thought, oh, those, let's just publish this? And I was like, I know it's not as simple as that. It doesn't work like that. But you sort of still keep thinking that. But so it's interesting that if you're a couple of books in and you still think that. So I think that leads us into our next question, that when we started, our journeys to publication, can you talk us through some of the biggest barriers you might have faced and how did you navigate them? Anyone start?
I think I'll leave the internal sort of worries aside, the ones that we've been talking about, imposter syndrome and all of those. I think just overcoming those, but getting into publishing itself, I think probably the some isolated incidents when I was lucky in a lucky position to actually get quite a few full requests for manuscripts when I sent them to agents. But one of the agents came back to me and said, I don't really know where your story would sit on the shelf. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? It's a story about a girl trying to find her missing brother. She goes on a train journey. It's a mystery and adventure shelf, perhaps. So I think it just happens to be set in India, and I think there was this sort of undercurrent, really just this discomfort, perhaps, about that some children might find the story too different. I grew up in India reading Enid Blyton, Nancy Drew's Hardy Boys, Three Investigators, you name it, right? And even though I didn't understand some of the words and some of the cultural references, I understood the story. I understood the emotions and feelings. So most of my stories, I tried doing that with my second book as well. I went back to my agent and my editor said, you know what, I'm going to set the book here. I'm going to set it here because that's it. And I tried to write that story about this little kid. And I realized that right now, the stories that want to be told through me are the stories that are still set in India. And anytime I do school visits, children who have an Indian background, when they read the book, they'll come to me and say, "Oh, you know what? Yeah, I go to Sarvana Bhavan. Yeah, I eat that food. I do that." And children who aren't, they'll come and say, "I love my brother. Yeah, I have that same kind of emotion." So it is more about the perceptions and the challenges that I get. Certain librarians will come and say to me, "Oh, we love your book. There are a lot of Asian kids who live in our area," and I kind of think, you know what? That's great. That's wonderful that there are lots of Asian kids, but you know what? Anyone can read the book, and I think it's those kind of sort of subconscious undercurrents that I am constantly trying to dispel or work through with the stories and with the people that I meet. Yeah.
Um, I have a couple things. So one of the things was something that I know we touched on before, which is contracts. It's insane how long contracts actually take after like technically being accepted for the offer. I remember being really disheartened by it, especially because with Illustrator specifically, certain publishers, it's very difficult to like push because I think especially in the children's media, illustrating is so important. Like a lot of kids will like see the colors and the pictures, and that would make them want to read the story. I know that's how it usually was for me. It's interesting because I wasn't a big reader as a kid, but I'd always be like, I love that cover. Look at the characters. Like, I want to read that book. But yeah, it's really luckily I had an agent who was like fighting for me on that side of like making sure that I'm properly compensated for my work with publishers and stuff like that. But that did mean that it took forever to finally get the contract signed and like actually work on the illustrations and stuff like that. And then there's also a fear that I had of being like pigeonholed into like um, I love the idea of creating stories and characters that look like me and the people that I'm around. And I think it's so fun that kids these days get to like see themselves in like visually see themselves in stories. Like even when I get character like briefs that don't have a specific like ethnicity and stuff like that, like I love just putting my own ethnicity or like people that I know into that. Like I remember in one of the recent books I illustrated, there was a scene with a bunch of background characters. And one of the characters, I put a little jewelry on him because I know as a kid, like you never see stuff like that. Like even when you are creating characters of certain ethnicities, a lot of the times publishers or editors will come back and say, we want like the most stereotypical or like easily perceived Indian girl or Indian boy. So it's really cool to get to like put those things that I know as an Indian person that I will see that and recognize that. And I know other kids will too. But I had a fear of being like pigeonholed into that sector. So it's been really fun to like, so I have two books that are out, and one of them are very like, one is very South Asian, and one is diverse, but not specifically South Asian. So it's been really cool to work on those two stories at the same time.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
incredible. I think I love how illustrators can sort of do Easter eggs for themselves and
Yeah.
for the writer, because I know in Twirly and Navia is such a brilliant illustrator, and we sort of went through the background cast, and I sort of said, you know, if you could do outfits maybe a bit like my family, and then you know, she's put in sort of people from her life, and it's so much fun to look at all the background characters where you can sort of drop in bits and pieces or like
Yeah.
outfits from the 70s or like your parents wore or something. And I've got that in the
Yes.
book as well. So I think like an illustration is such an
Mm.
amazing thing to do. So yeah, that's congratulations
you.
on being able to do that.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else, Alan?
I was very lucky with my first book. I feel like I wrote a book proposal. I immediately got an agent, and yes, I was rejected by all the British publishers, but I did eventually get a book deal. So my initial experience was, as far as I'm concerned, fine. I think the experiences following that have been more problematic because I think one of the barriers to an ongoing career, and that's something we ought to discuss, is debuts are very exciting to publishers because you haven't got a track record. Like, oh, this book might do well. And then if you don't sell millions or you don't earn back your advance or whatever, then you become less attractive to publishers, I think. And one of the things I feel that I've been missing personally is a champion, someone who really loves my writing and thinks what I do is important. And I think other writers have that either through their agent or their publishers. And I think, you know, I'm 6 books in and I don't have that. I don't feel there's somebody in the industry who is powerful, who is going to back me. And there are still gatekeepers, there are people with power. And if you haven't got them in your corner, then you have a bigger battle ahead. And, you know, I am very confident in my own work. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't believe in myself or my work. And that's not about arrogance, that's about doing what we do because we wouldn't do it if we didn't believe in it. But without the support of industry figures, even someone as simple as an agent who really wants you to succeed. And I think it's a massive problem for lots of people. And I've seen people treated far worse than I have, far worse, where, you know, they sign a deal for a debut book and then because they didn't sell a lot of copies, the agent and the publishers just completely lose interest. And I think that's a barrier. And especially for people who don't come from backgrounds, traditional writing backgrounds, you know, you get the excitement of the first deal, and then there's no one to nurture you, no one to help develop you. And I think that's a barrier for all of us. And so it enrages me that people talk about diversity and inclusion. And I've seen it both. I used to work in television, I've done writing for journalism and so forth. I've seen it in all these industries where everyone talks about diversity and inclusion, but they don't really understand how to deliver on that. And we're all here as brown people, but one of the biggest problems I've seen is the lack of understanding of what poor people need, people from non-middle class backgrounds, people who don't have supportive parents and so forth. And so those are real barriers, and they continue to be barriers for me, even though I'm now comfortably middle class. And I want to make this point, you know, like you, I didn't start writing until I was nearly 40. And the reason why I didn't start writing until I was 40 is because I didn't, despite my success as an individual, I managed to have I come from a very disadvantaged, underprivileged background. And it took me until 40 to imagine I could be a writer, despite being a kid who loved books. I love nothing more than books. I'm a science teacher. And if you'd asked me what my favorite thing was as a teenager or a kid, it was books. But why did I do science? But why do so many Asian kids do science? Because we're good at it, right? And they tell you to do that so you can get a job, so you can have a career. Nobody told me I should be a writer, you know. And the reason why I'm a science teacher and I haven't been writing since I was a kid is because my science teachers recognized that I was good at science. They encouraged me, they nurtured me, they pushed me. And my English teachers didn't, you know. So, you know, what are the barriers? For me, the barrier remains that I'm still having to prove myself. 6 books in, critically acclaimed books in, okay? And so I feel very strongly about that, obviously.
No, that is a barrier. Right?
I think everyone has echoed my thoughts as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting is how so many of us sort of start writing when we're older, because if we're sort of South Asian, it's that understanding that you're going to get sort of these types of jobs that you're going to sort of be paid in a different way. And you sort of don't even dare sometimes to say, I think I might want to write or illustrate. And it takes us like, yeah, 40s to sort of say, I'm going to make time for it. And I think one of the biggest barriers, again, is if you've got family, full-time work, is making time to actually write and then actually think, is this going to be any good? And there's so many sort of stages of what you have to do to sort of, finish that first draft or finish that first portfolio or sort of, do I get an agent? Don't get an agent. There's so many things you learn and that we sort of come into it sort of so much later. So I think, as you said, it's cultural. Definitely that's one of the barriers. So that's why I think it's so lovely that we can get ourselves into schools as early as possible, and especially into schools where we know that the area will be like, a lot of sort of, South Asian children, because it's great for them to see then authors like us to say, look, I, have a mother who looks like that, or a sister or an aunt or somebody, and I relate to those characters, eat the same food. And I think that's so important. And you don't realize the importance of that until you're sort of seeing that. Like I've done a couple of visits in East London schools, and in part of Twirly, we sort of do a little dance, and I can sort of put on like, Bollywood music. And a lot of them go like, yeah, I danced to that at the wedding and stuff. And that's so lovely because it's something that they can relate to. So yeah, biggest barriers is definitely something that if there's a cultural shift in the South Asian community that encourages arts, that would be lovely. And I think that probably takes us straight into the next question, that how do you feel your identity as a South Asian writer shapes your path, possibly into children's publishing, or just how being a South Asian writer in publishing feels for you? I mean, we've spoken about this a little bit already, but is there anything else that you think,
Can I
how it
start?
shaped you? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think for me it's really interesting because even though my parents were very supportive of my career path, I remember going to like parties and meeting extended family, and they're always asking you, oh, like, are you gonna go to uni? Like, what have you decided to do? Or like, what are you studying? And everyone, I'm sure everyone understands in our culture, like all the aunties boast about their children, and it's always a thing of like, who's like got the best career lined up and stuff like that. And for me, I didn't go to uni, so that was always a big thing, having to tell like all these elders that like, oh, I'm not doing that. And then also um, saying, also, I'm doing something creative. Like, I feel like it was, I got a lot of like awkward stares or like people kind of dismissing me or like not really understanding, but also not taking the time to try and understand. Um, and I feel like because I was never really like extroverted at these events anyway, and I was very never really super close to extended family. Those comments did like make me think, but because I had I was like very, very lucky to have the support of my parents with my creative career. Um, and also the decision not to go to uni, I feel like that's such a big thing, especially in our community. Um, and yeah, I feel like those initial steps of being like, kind of like what you said about you have to fight for yourself, like you have to champion yourself. And it's not about being arrogant or being egotistical. It's like sometimes you're the only one who can. So, or like you're the only person who'll be there for yourself. And that was really difficult for me because I'm a very like insecure person in that sense. I feel like a lot of creatives are. The more creatives I talk to, the more, yeah, you realize that people like downplay it and be like, oh, it's not that interesting, or like, oh, it's just this little story, and you find out they're like an award-winning author. But yeah, you really have to like you really have to like fight for and like believe and like talk about yourself in an interesting way so you know that other people will see that within you. And then also I feel like it's made me really push for diversity in like characters and stuff like that. Even I remember, so I started in like character design for animation. And I remember getting briefs that were like very vague and creating all these different characters. And like I said before, they would always go for the most stereotypical one. But I feel like it's really cool to even be like, hey, you should think about these choices or these designs or like stuff like that. Even not just in my culture. Like I remember I was creating like a mixed race child of like British and Caribbean descent. And they went for like I had all these like fun hairstyle options and like I even got pictures and references from my friend who's Caribbean. And even though the animation studio decided to go for the most generic looking one, it was fun to be like, hey, you should think about this, or like just making those characters to put in my portfolio to be like, I can do stuff like this if anyone's interested. So yeah, I feel like that's yeah.
Do any of you anything else?
I want to
add?
hear Alom's answer.
So I think identity is very complex, is an obvious thing to say. I think we are all different people in different settings and so forth. I introduced myself first and foremost as a father, and that really is the most important identity I inhabit at the moment. But all of my work is informed by my many identities. And my first book was very much about who I was growing up in the community that I grew up. My following books, I think if anyone looked at them with any intelligence, you would see that I'm coming from a place of South Asian origin. I'm Bangladeshi. My work is informed by being Bangladeshi, but not in obvious ways. So, for example, in one of my books, which is it's a book about making your own toys from scrap materials. Published like Dorling Kindersley might publish a book like this, okay? And it would be big and glossy and have pictures. The opening introduction to that book is about being born in Bangladesh in the 1970s, being poor, not having shop-bought toys, and as Bangladeshi people having to recycle and reuse, right, which is a green message, right? But it's a green message that comes from a Bangladeshi origin. And nobody picked up on that, you know? Nobody's commented on it in the reviews or whatever, but that's me. Only I could have written that. Similarly, with all my books, except I was saying to Darren earlier, I'm going to say this, I know this isn't entirely private, but my most recent book is my most commercial book. And I don't feel the same sense of ownership about it. It's for a commercial publisher. I feel it's not authored by me, even though I wrote a huge amount of it. But even in that, if you could probably, if you know me, you would spot the sections that I have written, because I am in the words, and it sounds really egotistical, and it is. I think writing is fundamentally egotistical, because you know who I am, my identity, it informs what I write, it drives what I write, it inspires what I write, and being Bangladeshi is part of that, a huge part of that. But nowadays, so is being a dad, so is being a science teacher. If you read my work, obviously. But yeah, you know, I don't want to get away from being Bangladeshi. I don't deny it, but it's not everything about me. And I hope that's clear in my work.
Yeah, well, I'm Sri Lankan, so I obviously write Sri Lankan inspired characters, but most of my family, my nephews and my daughter, they're immigrants. So I feel like the stories I'm telling are for them. And I have a very complex identity as well, because as you know, my last name is Smith. I have British heritage, and my mom is Tamil, which we had an ethnic conflict about. So identity is very confusing even for me now. And I try to bring that out in my stories. So yeah.
Thank you. So I think that goes straight into, do any of us feel any pressure to represent our culture in a particular way when we're writing our books? And I think what's so interesting is, and I mean, I've only got the one book out, but I think when we were doing characters and it first was going into color, and as you were saying, it's that sort of default, if you're South Asian, there's this one shade of brown. And if you're like, you know, there's this one shade of black, one shade of brown, and I was like, I'm kind of beige. So I was like, can we find like a beige color? And I went through this whole color chart and I actually picked out the closest, you know, color to me, beige. And I was like, that's so important. There's loads of kids, you know, we're not all just brown, that one brown. And and the publishers are lovely, and everyone was sort of, completely behind me. But that was so interesting because the default was, this sort of like color chart. And it was so important to me to show that there are kids who are all shades of brown in South Asian families. My family is so mixed. I have mixed family anyway, but it's like, I want my family members, all the children, to see themselves and say different shades of brown, different sort of, the way they look, their eyes and stuff. And that was definitely one of the things that I was really sort of passionate about, for sure. So I think understanding and like having an editor who understands the culture, and my editor was fantastic, but it's really interesting when you have editors, or if you have agents or editors especially, who aren't coming from your background. How do they absorb your story? And then how, like you were saying, if they edit it and say, let's set it in the UK, and you're like, no, it's got to be in India. But like, because some can sort of understand where these stories come from and some don't. And I think a lot of us, as you said, you were reading like Enid Blyton and Nancy Drew. I think we read without color. We sort of read these stories because we were relating to the characters. I didn't even see the fact that, Anne is white or blonde or Julian blonde. It didn't matter to me. I know what they look like on the cover, but I read them as stories. And so when we're now sort of in this age where they're like, oh, that program, people can't relate to it or this, that. And I'm like, what do you mean? We've grown up in our entire lives relating to characters that don't look like us. What's the big deal? So I think like that's a really big push about sort of having characters that look like us, and definitely sort of South Asian representation. So did any of you feel any particular pressure? I mean, I know you said that you sort of made sure it was in India, but anyone
No,
else?
the pressure wasn't from my publisher. My publishers are wonderful. I love them. It was, and I think the pressures, they're all internal for me. I feel like I need to write something which, you get sort of carried away. I'm doing a social media detox at the moment because it's not helping with the state of things at the moment. But you feel like you need to conform. You feel like you need to be fit into that box where you think that that's how it is. But a nice story actually from my publishers is I remember one of the first edits that I got back from them. I had italicized all of the Hindi words. I had done that. And they came back and said, why are you doing this? We don't italicize. And I was like, right. Why did I do that? And I think it's that sense check that I'm doing more and more often, because once I write the book, the commercial and the market forces are going to take over. It's going to be out of my hands. I can't do much. I can do a little bit here and there, but what's going to happen is going to happen. But if I censor myself right at the beginning, then I'm not even giving my story a chance, right? So that's the dialogue that I'm having with myself pretty much every day. Yeah.
I think I feel pressure now after writing my 2 books and getting published, because at that point in time, I didn't really know what was out there. So I just wrote the stories that I wanted to write. But now I feel like, because the feedback that I get from editors and agents, when you read between the lines, I feel like they want a story that's very typical of what they are looking for. Whereas I have switched and I'm writing stories that feature South Asian characters, but they are doing fun things. And this is kind of like the marketer in me. When I go to events and I speak to parents, they say, yeah, I love your book because it's a boy who's just enjoying having fun, basically. And those are the kind of stories that we would like to read. But unfortunately, I don't think that's what an editor or an agent is looking for.
No, I was really delighted to work with an Indian illustrator for How to Find a Rainbow. It was really important to have somebody who knew the countryside that we wanted to depict, and I was very glad that my publisher got that from the off, really. I had an experience with another illustrator. There's almost an unbelievable story whereby the illustrations came back and all the characters in the book, all the children in the book were white. It was like really, but it just showed how there are still people who don't think about this stuff. But with How to Find a Rainbow, I really wanted to set it in India, the subcontinent, because that's where my childhood was. And also I felt nobody had done a kind of animal children's story in that setting. But going back to Enid Blyton and whatnot, that book is very much an homage to Frog and Toad and the picture books that I had read. But I think authenticity can become quite problematic, and we can discuss whether it's important or not. But for How to Find a Rainbow, I think working with an Indian illustrator who was literally living in India really helped.
Yeah. And I think it's so lovely when you've got editors who completely get your story, whether they're sort of from the same background, or agents that really support you, or illustrators that are sort of South Asian, or even if they're not South Asian, they are open to sort of getting mood boards from you and stuff. So I think that makes such a difference, having such a supportive, and I've always been lucky, and I've got amazing publishers who've always been really supportive. So I think that is the real difference, because we've heard stories where sometimes that doesn't happen, and you're like, feel quite. And we sort of feel fortunate that we're like, oh, are we lucky? But actually, then maybe we shouldn't. Maybe it should just be that easy, and like everyone should just understand these stories. So, I.
Oh, could I just add something
yes,
to the
please.
question? I feel like I have, because I've grown up Asian British, so both of my parents are Indian. My dad was born in India and came over. My mom grew up in the UK. I always had this feeling of not feeling Asian enough, which I feel like a lot of people from my generation definitely have. And especially when I used to like hang out with my extended family, it's like kind of like so I didn't learn Punjabi as a child, even though my grandma used to speak Punjabi. I couldn't understand it, but I never could like respond properly and have a proper conversation. And then I remember getting offers for these like South Asian stories, and I was like, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell this story, yeah. And like create these designs, but I feel like I've realized that that's like you were
You're
saying.
Asian enough.
Thank you, thank you. I feel like I realized that, like you were saying, it's an internal pressure, like it's an insecurity that I have and not something that other people are putting onto me. So if I'm confident within myself to tell these stories, then other people will see that too. And yeah, I just thought it was an interesting comparison because I'm like, I've grown up in the UK.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And you, as like one South Asian person, you don't represent every single South Asian like
Exactly,
person in the
yeah.
world. And you're
Yeah.
like, this is my little story. This is my little
Yeah.
journey. I can only, tell you what my experience is. But sometimes it's sort of, do you say, yeah, like, is it there the pressure to represent all brown people?
Yeah.
You're like,
It's like I'm Indian and then the publishers were telling this story about a Bengali family. And I've
yeah.
grown up in like Whitechapel area, so I have a lot of the like I know a lot about the culture just from my surroundings, but it was so interesting because I was like, I don't know if I'm the
Yeah.
illustrator
And
to
you're
tell
like,
this
if I'm the
story.
right
Yeah.
person for this.
But no, it was really fun to work on that book, so I'm glad I got to do it. Yeah.
Okay. So now that you are all accomplished and published, is there a piece of advice that you got given as a pre-debut that you could share? Or if you could give your past self some advice or encouragement, knowing what you know now, what would it be? So while you have a think, and something that Alom had touched on before, as a writer, we talk a lot about nurturing writing careers. And pre-debut, I thought that support would come from an agent or a publisher. And in some instances, obviously, that is the case, but for others, it isn't. And how do you lift yourself up as a writer? And so for me, the most essential support that I've had are my writing groups. I've got this amazing picture book writing group. I've got my little writing coven. I've got this amazing writing community. And we all support and cheerlead each other. And it's about like when you talk about nurturing careers, I think we nurture each other definitely, and then like bring yourself up as a writer. And even if we're starting in our 40s, 50s, 60s, 20s, like, how do you, if you feel like you don't have those champions, do we then sort of find other people? And like, I mean, I feel like other writers, we champion each other. And I think that's definitely something that I would give myself advice of when I first started writing, I thought automatically an agent publisher would be that would be it. But now definitely I would be like, no, look outwards and it's fine. And you sort of, how you sort of react to how people champion you and you want to sort of cheerlead them. And I think all our Instas are full of that. Like, we all support each other, social media, you lift each other up. And so that's definitely something that I wouldn't have realized pre-publication, but I do. And there's a lot of importance and sort of gratefulness for that now. Anyone else? Advice for your pre-debut persons?
Very quick one. Farrah and I are part of that wonderful debut group community, lifting each other up. But for me, I think I'll use Margaret Atwood's words. Respect the page. It's all you've got. And I think that's it. One of the earliest advice that I got was Steve Walk, who's a wonderful teacher and writer himself. He said, you know, it's like panicking about how am I going to finish the book, and he is like, word by word. That's what you do. And I think going back to the writing of it, no matter what else is happening, no matter how well your book is doing, whether you're getting the deal, whether you're not, whether you have the community, whether you're not, what you always have is the page and is the writing. And for me, that's it. I will always go back to the page. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that to enjoy the process because it's a long one. And I think like when I get frustrated by things not moving quickly, I quickly go back to the story. And like, even if I'm editing it, this is what I really enjoy. And this is what would like lead to other things. And even the little bits, like when you get your first email about publication, enjoy that, enjoy meeting, community. So just enjoy every little thing and
Enjoy every
celebrate.
moment.
Yeah, little
Every
wins.
win.
Yeah.
I've had so many good things come out of having started writing. I blame it on meeting my wife and the family. I've been so lucky. And one of the pieces of advice I was given, which I would take it earlier, is somebody told me to go and do a master's in creative writing. So obviously I had a science degree, and I hadn't written essays or whatever at school or college really. And somebody said, go and do a master's in creative writing. And my God, I loved it. I loved it as one of the best educational experiences of my life. I wish I'd done it when I was 20. I wish I'd studied creative writing at university, but I did it in my 40s. I went and did a degree in creative writing. It was the best educational experience of my adult life. I met other people, writers, and going back to what you were saying, you know, other writers are your best champions. They're going to be your best friends. They're going to be the people who hook you up with agents and publishers and so forth. But yeah, I wish I had done my master's in creative writing before I was a published writer, before I did any of this, because it really gave me the experience and tools that I was lacking, and made me want to write even more.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's really spoken about the community. Freelancing is such an isolating thing because you're working on your own as much as you're working with creative people, especially in my industry. The only time that you meet those creative people is at events like this or at like book launches and stuff like that. Typically, it's always just emails or like Zoom meetings and stuff like that. So I think my advice to my younger self would just be like indulge in the community. Like creative people are so nice. Everyone's so lovely. Yeah. Yeah, and just do it scared. I feel like I've always just lived by it. Yeah, I have anxiety about everything. So I'm just like, it's that feeling's never gonna go away. You just kind of have to
Let the adrenaline take
exactly,
over.
exactly. There's this thing where you can like trick your brain into thinking you're not anxious, you're just really excited about something because it's the same like
We all just did that
chemicals in
before
your
we
body. So yeah, just do it scared, guys. You've got this.
So we have some questions.
Well, I have some questions from people who are
brilliant.
online, right? So, do you feel South Asian authors are put through more hoops by the publishers and agents than their white counterparts?
We'd like to go first.
I don't know. Honestly, I have my own experience, just my own experience. And I do not compare myself to other people, and I will not compare myself to other people. I do not, and it's very hard. There's anecdotal evidence there, and there's research there, and we can look at all of the kind of, interesting things that come out of it. But at the end of the day, if that experience, I will fight my battles, and I will help other people along the way. Do whatever that I can, but if that comparison is just going to make it difficult for me to make work, then yeah, I'm just not going to do it. Sorry.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Hi.
Yeah.
Online people are very actively asking questions. Right. This is for illustrations. I think more. So Simran, if you know only how to draw a dog, can I just draw dogs, or do I have to draw South Asian children? Is there a requirement to draw South Asian children in all our stories?
Wait, I don't know if I understood the question.
South Asian dogs? Or?
So
Wait.
can you put animals and other things as well in your illustration, or are you also always forced to draw children in your illustrations? Like
Animals versus actual kids.
Oh, I feel like my agent is making me add animals to my portfolio all the time. I think the thing with illustration as well, or like I think this applies to anything creative. Do what you like so you attract the people who want to hire you for the stuff that you like doing. As much as I feel like it's good to expand your portfolio and have something for everyone, if you show a lot of passion for drawing animals, then I'm sure someone will hire you for the animals that you draw. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. I think one of the first freelance work that I did was for a South Asian story, but it was set around like folklore and the animals in India. So yeah, that was there's definitely a market for animals. Lovely.
no, wait.
Wait for the mic here, because it's
Come
going
over.
to do a fancy recording.
Hello. Thanks for talking to us. I wanted to know what your experience, oh, there's echo, was as a debut author in terms of marketing yourself, or any pressure you experienced to stand out in the crowd and champion yourself as writers.
So what about our marketing budget, folks? Publicity, marketing, how did you feel about that?
So I think all debut authors, unless you're already famous and rich, are nowadays expected to do a large portion of their own marketing and promotion. I don't think that's a great thing. I think it's really weird that publishers expect writers who may have no experience of public performance or designing events or whatever to go out and do that stuff. But that's the way it is. I'm quite lucky. I worked in television. I enjoy producing events and talking and blah blah blah. So I work with children anyway. But I've invested an awful lot of my own time and money and effort into promoting my books, and which it's very difficult for me to actually measure whether that's led to more book sales or not. It's very, you can, for example, do the calculations in terms of if you do a live event, you might sell so many books. If you do those calculations, you will quickly work out that you are never going to be a bestseller. Okay, so I'm a children's writer. I've had some success with my books. My absolute favorite of my books is How to Find a Rainbow. I wrote that for my daughters. I'm incredibly glad that it exists. However, I wrote it at a time when I had 2 young children. I was also working as a teacher, and my publisher's whole approach to marketing was you have to go into schools and do talks. And I can't travel outside of London to give talks. I've got children to look after. I've got a job to go to. So I wasn't able to go to hundreds of schools to talk about the book, to read the book. And if you do the calculations, as I said, imagine I'd done 100 schools. Imagine you sell at most 50 books per school. How many books is that you're selling in a year? It's a really inefficient mode of promotion. However, everyone tells you it's what you have to do. I've got a new book out at the moment. I'm going to go and give talks, but I'm sticking to London schools. I'm doing it because I quite enjoy the subject. I want to talk about it, but I don't think it's going to make a dent in the sales. I don't think it's really going to work as a promotional activity. And I think there's lots been written about this. I've written about it. There needs to be a serious discussion between authors and publishers and agents about what expectations are and what the reality of promoting books are. Something that frustrates me is like ordinary people saying, hey, Alom, why don't you go on TikTok? Why don't I'm not on Instagram. I've come off Instagram because look at the data. Even if you have 1 million followers and you put a link to your book, what is the conversion rate to sales? Like the data exists, and yet publishers will tell you you need to have a social media profile. I don't think you do. Like I think your books will probably sell in the same numbers because actually what sells a book is reviews and recognition in mainstream media. So I know that my sales, if I'm ever lucky enough to get on BBC Radio, I will see a spike in my sales. You know, so I'm still waiting for that day when I get a poster campaign, Radio 4 Book of the Day. It's going to happen at some point, right? So yeah, good luck to all you new people. Enjoy the promotion. Enjoy going out and speaking to people about your books. Enjoy the fact that 50 people are buying your book. Like, enjoy that. But it's not really going to make the difference between you being like a non-bestseller and a bestseller. It really isn't. And I'm happy to discuss my experiences and how to do it with anyone in this audience if you get in touch.
I think it's also interesting that you kind of have to be an influencer nowadays. Like you have to have an online presence. Like you said, your first book deal. Oh, your first book deal was from going on Twitter and the Australian publisher seeing that. I'm also not a social media person. Like I don't like the amount of people that are like, go on TikTok, like you'll blow up on TikTok. And I'm like, oh, but it's so much effort. Like creating is so much effort. And then creating for a platform is so much more effort. Yeah.
3 hours.
So I feel like it is really important because it is a way to get people to see your work, but it's not necessarily, like you said, a way to get people to buy your work
It's
and
an
spend
awareness
their
of each
money on
other
it.
rather than actually getting your book sold. I think it's just
Yeah.
like lift each other up, and then go, I got a new book, and you just champion each other. But
Yeah.
yeah, about sales, that's
Yeah.
a different story.
Yeah.
We have one more question in the audience. We've got time for one more question, audience, and then I want to sneak one in. Can I sneak one in? Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your debut journeys with us. It's really, as a kind of a wannabe author, an emerging author, it's really valuable to hear experiences. And these forums where we get to talk are really powerful. The publishing industry itself, as we know, is all about talking. But I want to change tack to something, and I'm sure we'll address this later in the day, is about something perhaps they don't talk so much about with authors. And this is from hearing from well-known published authors. To paraphrase, I'm getting to my question. To paraphrase Jerry Maguire, how often do the publishers show you the money?
So,
like the visibility of data and all of the things on Nielsen, for example.
Can one of us maybe answer this one? Do you think we have time for one person answering this one?
You have to ask for it. Yeah, unless you're, and this is something that my consulting background really prepared me very well. I wrote the book and then shifted my perspective thinking publishing is a commercial business. They are there to make money. There's space for everybody. There's a reason why we have celebrity authors. There's a reason why publishers are going after authors that sell, right? There's the image and all of those. And you have to understand that. You need, when I got my deal, when I got my advance, I knew exactly where in the list of my publishers list I was very firmly in the mid-list author range. So I knew what it was. If I want, I ask them, what are the sales? Even for publicity, right? I can do this. Make yourself available. But unless you have access to the Nielsen data, which you can get through your agents or publishers, it's going to be hard to actually see them.
Okay. I'm going to sneak one really quick question to end on a high note. That being a children's author means that you really shouldn't have any ego. Has there ever been any interesting or hilariously blunt comment from a child that you can share with us? My personal favorite is, your story is boring. Why don't you write about dinosaurs in space? And I love that. That was lovely. He was honest. He was frank. He was right in the front. It was a 250 children's assembly. And yeah, that no ego as a children's writer. So is there anything, one comment that like funny?
Yeah, there was this little kid who drew me and then handed me the paper with myself and said, please fill in your name.
Perfect.
The best thing to happen to me was the mother of a teenage girl came up to me after a talk and she said, my daughter has just been caught shoplifting And if I hadn't read your book, I would have been much meaner to her.
Oh, that's really sweet. Best thing, I did a workshop and a girl just stood there because she wanted a hug from me.
Oh.
And I'm such a hugger, so that's it. Dream.
Guys, I need to do more events.
Perfect.